a really great feeling when your own community is investing in you.
There's so many different avenues that we have to express our Judaism and our connection to the community.
The Jewish Foundation makes a statement that everyone needs to get involved and everyone can make a difference.
It's the very core of Judaism to do what we can to give back.
Take the baton that we're handing you, run with it, do the best you can at building the community, and then hand it off to the next generation.
The first settlers, there was a very tiny community, less 100 people perhaps, that came in the 1870s, and most of those came via Minneapolis or St. Paul. Other ones came from Germany through the United States, so slightly better off than Jews, European Jews that came later. The main nucleus of the community started coming from a geographic area called the Pale of Settlement. It was a restricted area in what would be like Western Russia and Poland today, Belarus as well, and the Ukraine. And they were restricted to live there. They lived under extremely impoverished conditions. There were hundreds of restrictions about what they could and couldn't do. On top of that, industrialization made their lives fairly miserable because many of them lost jobs. 80 to 90% of them were probably living a hand-to-mouth existence. So in that 1880 period, Jews who had some means or were able to get out through the help of Jews in other parts of the world were able to immigrate.
By 1914, about 2 million Jews had left Eastern Europe. Several thousand arrived in Manitoba. They were poor but ambitious and found a way to build strong institutions and welcome new immigrants. Two of the pioneers from 1882 were Fanny and Chaim Wiedemann. Their grandson reflects.
Well, this was the spot that in the early days, I would guess from the early 1900s on, the early immigrants came into Winnipeg. The family, my Zeta and other members of the family met the trains of the immigrants coming in here, and I would guess that they took some of them home for dinner and watched them develop. And many of these immigrants got jobs at Wiedemann Brothers in the early days.
The Wiedemanns and others like them were true pioneers. Chaim worked on the railway, built a business, and helped to establish a community.
Well, my Zeta in particular was very interested in the young people being educated with a Jewish background. And as a result, he spent every day going to the dormitory and seeing that the children were well educated. He was also a president of Shara Zedek in the early days, and he was just very much involved, and he was committed to the community.
Years later, the devastation of the Holocaust, followed by the joyful establishment of the modern state of Israel, further shaped the world Jewish community. In Winnipeg, our community connected passionately with the Jewish world, while still building a vibrant infrastructure at home.
It was a community that had many programs and support structures that had been built from the time of the earliest immigrants up through the organization of the welfare fund. So it was well structured in terms of its fundraising and redistribution capacity for need. There was a multifaceted school system reflecting the amazing diversity of this community. And it was a community that was anxious and optimistic, ready to go, looking into the future.
A period of exciting development followed the war. The YMHA and new synagogues were built. But with growth came challenges.
So as we emerged out of the 70s and at the beginning of the 80s, suddenly we came face to face with the reality imposed by this tremendous growth period we've gone through for the last 20 years. And most of our institutions had substantial debts. Our schools, our center, everything had major debts. And we suddenly became aware that we had a problem. And I was asked to put together a community balance sheet. And what it revealed was that if we collected all of the debts of all of the schools and the community center and everything else, we were about close to $2.5 million in debt. As we came together to look at our financial and administration needs, we were able to say, let's bring ourselves together as a community and physically together. And the idea of the community campus emerged.
Led by Marjorie Blankstein, Sheldon Burney, Bob Friedman, and others, the Asper Jewish Community Campus opened its doors in 1997. It remains an important hub and a strong symbol of the community's historic ability to understand and address its needs.
The Jewish commitment to this community is of critical importance. And not only as most communities begin among themselves to strengthen themselves and support themselves, which is so important, but then the outreach to the balance of the community. I've said to people, this isn't an accident, this Winnipeg that we see today. It's come about because people have got together and said, we're bigger than the individual aspects of it, and we need each other. This is a community that is, it's a giving community, and an important part of that is the Jewish community in Winnipeg.
A proud community in a vibrant society. As the community built infrastructure and built bridges, the birth of the Jewish Foundation in 1964 stands out as an important milestone. In late 1963, Joseph Halprin, Abe Warrior, and Sam Warrior started to speak about launching a Jewish foundation. They donated a parcel of land they owned to give the foundation its first asset, and they put the administrative steps in motion. In short order, 119 men had pledged money and put their names on a petition to the legislature. By April 1964, the provincial legislature granted royal assent, and the Jewish Foundation was born. It was run by volunteers until Izzy Peltz was named executive director in 1974. At first, only part-time, while he led the Winnipeg Jewish Community Council. With the help of longtime assistant Gene Boorman and devoted volunteers, the foundation grew under Izzy.
Well, he was very, very sincere, and he feeling that the Jewish Foundation was the financial security of our community, because you couldn't touch the capital. The only money you could use was money that you earned from your trust. And therefore he thought he was selling something very, very important. And we used to talk about the old organizations in Winnipeg, the free-loan societies, that used to raise money but spent it as fast as they raised it. There was nothing left and the organizations disappeared. Like the Nikolaev or the Popoyska and the Berliner and so forth. But you couldn't do that with the foundation. He said we're selling something solid and had the best future you could think about. But he was always out there looking for contributors. He never sat in his office waiting for some to come to him. He always went to them. And that was one of his best attributes. Every time Izzy made a major successful sale for the trust, he'd call me up and say, Laurie, what are you doing? Well, not much. Come over to the office, we'll have a drink. Make l'chaim, because today I made a major sale. But when the sales start coming in fast and furious, well, furious became much more quickly, we quit drinking because, you know, we can get over drinking too much as well.
The biggest l'chaim was reserved for 1976, when Joseph Sector and Max Shore stepped forward with major contributions. It was a turning point for the Jewish Foundation.
Well, it was also a turning point in his life. 1976 is the year that he sold his interest in our family business to the next generation. And as part of that, he decided that that was a good time to also kind of settle accounts and deal with other priorities in his life, which was largely community. And as part of that, he decided to make a major commitment to the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba, rather than waiting and doing it as part of his estate. As part of that process, as a way of hopefully encouraging others to think of doing the same thing, he enlisted the support of one of his good friends, Max Shore, to do the same. And their thought was that not only would they get the benefit of seeing this happen while they were still alive, but hopefully encourage others to think differently about what was possible for the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba.
After Izzy Peltz retired, David Cohen became the new executive director in 1991. In the 90s, the business of the foundation started to change. Guaranteed investments were offering lower returns. So the foundation started to invest in equities. A reserve fund was established to ensure that the foundation would never miss a year of distributing grants. And new programs were launched, including the Women's Endowment Fund and the ever-growing Endowment Book of Life, the Foundation's flagship planned giving program. More than 740 stories are in the Endowment Book of Life so far, shared mainly by donors who have named the Jewish Foundation in their wills.
The significance of that project, to me, is the capturing of the stories of the history of this community. I think it's quite unique, and for anybody who reads any of these stories, they can get a flavor of what this community is all about, how diverse it is, how caring it is, how dynamic it is.
Dynamic indeed. And the foundation has helped to strengthen the community by providing numerous grants and education awards, and supports organizations all along the spectrum of Jewish life. And in the general community, the foundation proudly supports organizations that help Manitobans of all backgrounds.
Last year, we served over 420,000 meals to people in our community that needed help. We have a health center, we have a shelter, we have a clothing bank, we have 2 employment training programs. All of this is free of charge to somebody experiencing poverty and homelessness in our community. The funds from the Jewish Foundation really, we had 2 particular grants that impact our community the most. The art program being one of them, and then the drop-in center. We got brand new tables and chairs this year. And if I could think of the impact, it's really about dignity and respect of people.
The Jewish Foundation of Manitoba was at all times a partner with Jewish Child and Family Service in helping us solve the issues, solve the problems that were cropping up that we ended up seeing because of the clientele we served, where people would have issues of not being able to pay for a set of dentures or needing to move, or because they were being evicted and yet 1 month's rent might help them. But it was also on a more systemic issue, whereas we saw trends arising in the Jewish community.
Through grants and through distributions from donors, the Jewish Foundation has helped to address pressing needs in the community: seniors transportation, camp and school tuition fees for Jewish foster children, language training for senior new Canadians, a bar mitzvah kiddush for a newly arrived family. The needs continue to grow and change, and the Foundation connects with other organizations throughout the community to understand emerging priorities.
The foundation is not just a blank check writer. It's an active participant in the community. What I know is that the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba gets it.
Our community's pioneers and the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba have always cared about building a dynamic future for the next generations. For the young adults who grew up here and now seek to make their mark. For the teenagers finding their Jewish voice and preparing themselves to lead. For the newcomers who have chosen Winnipeg. For the new pioneers.
I'm Viviana Steinberg and I came from Buenos Aires, Argentina in 2003. And I was practicing as a dentist for 8 years in Buenos Aires, and now in May I will be able to practice again as a Canadian dentist next year. Yeah, I couldn't believe having the Danske Award once and even twice was unbelievable for me. That made a huge difference. Financially, it helped me a lot, being the career very expensive, but it was a very important impact in my moral support that encouraged me to keep going and so to feel that I'm not by myself.
The Jewish Foundation has helped Viviana to pursue her dream. She and her husband Daniel are building a life here, and they see a future in Winnipeg for their 3 children.
I hope they can study if they want. I hope that they can find something that makes them feel happy. I hope that they stay here in Winnipeg. I feel that it's a very good city, and also I hope that they can be future leaders for Jewish community.
My name is Eka. I was born in Russia. Then when I was 10, I moved to Israel, and 6 years ago we moved to Winnipeg. I have a law degree from Israel. When we came to Canada, I realized that to have my law degree here and to work as a lawyer, I have to go back to university for a while. As a young mom to kids, it was hard decision. So I started to work as legal assistant with immigration law office. I loved the work. I loved to work with immigrants. It was something close to me. And in some point, about a year and a half ago, I decided to go back to school and to do something for myself. So I took the immigration consultant's course, and the Jewish Foundation gave me scholarship to cover some of the fees. It was great because it gave me the feeling that I have someone behind me who supports my decision, who wants to help.
Like our first pioneers, Eka feels strongly about welcoming newcomers. She has built a Facebook page to connect with newcomers, and in 2013, she and her husband Boris organized a huge picnic for newcomers at Assiniboine Park. For Eka, community life is all about providing opportunities to stay connected and to stay Jewish.
My personal belief is once you are living in other country, which is not a Jewish country, if you don't maintain this Jewish identity, you will lose it eventually. And I don't want my kids to lose it. I want them to know they are Jewish, to be proud of it.
I find that young Jews today are very proud of being Jewish, and they're open to new opportunities. And this, of course, gives all the Jewish organizations in Winnipeg an opportunity, an opening to engage all these young Jews positively. And one of the anchors in our community that can help support this entire project happen is the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba.
Avi Posen is a leading educator in the community. He has danced with the Chai Folk Ensemble, worked at BB Camp and Camp Masad, led Hillel, and works occasionally as a cantor. His journey to becoming a Judaic studies teacher was made possible by the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba.
So the 2 most unforgettable, inspiring educational experiences of my life were the year spent at Hebrew University in Jerusalem and my year spent at Yeshiva University in New York. And these were both experiences that were supported by the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba. And it really gives you a nice feeling when you know your community is supporting you. And it really makes the famous quote, Kol Yisrael arevim ze lazeh, all of Israel, all the Jewish people are responsible for each other, really come to fruition.
Throughout our community, we see examples of young people connecting, caring, and engaging. The future is in good hands.
I mean, Judaism is all about tzedakah and giving back to those who are less fortunate than us. And that is the very ideal that inspired me to give back and to raise a lot of money with cancer care and other foundations. I mean, I see people who need the help and who are less fortunate, and it's the very core of Judaism to do what we can to give back.
The Jewish Foundation is such a great organization, and they do so much for so many charities and causes around the city. And by having my Bat Mitzvah Fund, I get to be a part of that giving and give back to the community with the Jewish Foundation. I think one of the parts of having a bat mitzvah fund that means the most to me is that I get to choose where my funds go every year. So I get to give back to an organization that's made a difference in my life, and that's pretty meaningful.
I definitely think that when the time comes for our generation to be leaders in the community, we'll really step up to the plate and make our community thrive, and we'll start new programs and continue programs that are already in place, because I think the Jewish community means a lot to the young people of this generation, and I think we'll be able to continue that importance of Judaism throughout the generations.
The Jewish Foundation has prided itself over the years in building a legacy that we will pass on to future generations. That time is now. I believe that our young leaders, the newcomers to Manitoba, young people who are up and coming in our community, are going to take the baton from us and go forward. They are, in fact, our new pioneers.
Since 1964, the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba has empowered our community to meet the needs of today while building a solid base for the future. Our community's demographics and priorities will change over time. They always have. What will remain constant is the Jewish Foundation and its ability to support Jewish community life in all of its expressions. To sustain a proud Jewish community in the exceptional province of Manitoba.